The house was quiet that evening. Emily sat in her living room, staring at the rain sliding down the window. The sound of thunder rolled in the distance, echoing her thoughts. It had been a long few months, lonely, exhausting, and heavy with silence. Her husband, Mark, had been working overseas for nearly a year. And the distance between them wasn't just miles, it was emotional too. They spoke often, but their words felt routine. There was care, but the warmth was fading at 44. Emily found herself wondering how her life had slowed into emptiness. She wasn't unhappy exactly, but she wasn't living either. Her stepson, Jason, lived nearby. He was 25, polite, kind, and recently divorced. She had always liked him respectful, thoughtful, never crossing boundaries. After his marriage ended, he had grown quieter, just like her. Two lonely people orbiting the same family. That evening, the power went out. Emily sighed, holding her cup of tea as the lights flickered off. She sat in the faint glow of a candle, thinking of how quiet everything had become since Mark left. Her phone buzzed. It was Jason. Double quotes. Hey Emily, I saw the storm heading your way. Power's out at my place too. You okay? She smiled softly. I'm fine. Just cold and bored. Jason replied quickly. Want me to bring the small generator from the garage? I can help get some light back on. She hesitated for a moment, not wanting to trouble him, but it had been days since she'd had company. That would be nice, Jason. Thank you. Half an hour later he arrived, soaked from the rain, carrying a small generator and a flashlight. His presence immediately brightened the dim living room. You shouldn't be alone in this weather, he said with a grin, shaking his wet hair. Emily handed him a towel. You always show up like a hero, don't you? He laughed, wiping his face. Well, heroes need an audience. They set up the generator together, and soon a warm yellow glow filled the room. The air felt lighter. They talked for hours about work, life, and small things that didn't matter but somehow did. Emily found herself laughing for the first time in weeks. Jason's easy humor and quiet understanding filled a space she hadn't realized was empty. As the night grew later, the rain softened. Emily went to the kitchen to make coffee. Jason followed, leaning against the counter, watching her move. There was something peaceful about the scene, two people finding comfort in ordinary moments. You know? Jason said gently, Dad's lucky. You make everything feel calm. She looked up at him, surprised. Lucky. He nodded. Yeah, even when things feel cold, you bring warmth. For a moment, silence settled between them. Not awkward, just heavy with emotion, neither of them wanted to admit. Emily smiled to break the tension. You're kind, Jason, but I'm just trying to hold things together. I know, he said quietly. You've been doing that for everyone. But who holds things together for you? His words lingered in the air, soft but powerful. Emily didn't know what to say. No one had asked her that in years. She looked away, pretending to adjust the coffee cups. Her hands trembling slightly. Sometimes, she whispered, I don't know. Jason stepped back, giving her space. Sorry, I didn't mean to make you sad. You didn't, she said, managing a smile. It's just, life catches up with us, doesn't it? He nodded slowly. Yeah, I guess we both know that too well. They returned to the living room, sitting across from each other as the candlelight flickered. Emily noticed how much Jason had changed since his divorce. He seemed older, quieter, but also more thoughtful. She saw traces of his father in him, but also something different: gentleness, patience, and an openness Mark never really had. You've been through a lot, haven't you? She asked softly. He shrugged. Divorce teaches you how empty silence can be. She gave a sad smile. Silence used to be peaceful for me. Now it just feels loud. That simple exchange created something unspoken between them: understanding. It wasn't romance, not even attraction. It was recognition. Two lonely hearts sitting together in a storm. Hours passed and the storm finally calmed. Emily realized it was almost midnight. You should stay, she said. It's too late and wet to drive. Jason hesitated, then nodded. Thanks. I'll take the couch. As she brought him a blanket, their fingers brushed. It was an innocent touch, but it made Emily's heart skip. Not because of desire, but because she hadn't felt noticed in so long. That simple human connection felt like warmth after a long winter. She turned quickly. "Good night, Jason. Good night, Emily." She went to her room, but sleep didn't come easily. She kept thinking about his words. "Who holds things together for you?" They echoed in her mind, mixing with memories of Mark's long absences, of the loneliness that had quietly become her companion when she finally drifted to sleep. She dreamed of laughter, of sunlight, of the way life used to feel alive. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the curtains. The storm had passed. Jason was already awake, making coffee in the kitchen. Emily smiled faintly at the sight. "You're up early," she said. He turned, smiling. "Old habit. I used to do this for Sarah when we were married." His voice softened. "Guess I still remember." Emily took a seat. "It's nice. Thank you." They sat quietly, sipping coffee. The house felt different that morning, not just brighter, but lighter. Jason told her about a new job offer he was considering, one that would take him to another city. She listened, encouraging him, though she felt a small ache inside. "You should take it," she said. "You deserve a fresh start." He looked at her, a little smile playing on his lips. "You always say the right thing. You know that?" She laughed softly. "Maybe because I've learned the hard way what not to say." Jason leaned back. "Emily, can I tell you something? Last night, when I saw you alone in the dark, I realized something. You've always been there for everyone, but I don't think anyone sees how strong you really are." His words caught her off guard. She didn't know how to respond, so she just nodded. "Thank you, Jason. That means more than you think." Their eyes met for a second, longer than necessary. A quiet understanding passed between them, again gentle, respectful, but full of emotion neither dared to name. When Jason finally left that afternoon, Emily stood by the door watching him go. The silence returned, but this time it didn't feel as heavy. Something had changed. She wasn't sure what it was. Maybe hope? Maybe the reminder that she was still seen, still valued. She sat down with her cup of tea, looking out at the clearing sky. The world outside felt fresh, renewed. But deep inside, a quiet thought stirred a question she couldn't shake. Why did Jason's presence feel like a missing piece of something she'd long forgotten? The days after the storm felt strange for Emily. The house was back to normal, but something inside her wasn't. Every corner reminded her of that quiet night with Jason, the laughter, the way he had looked at her with such understanding, the rare warmth she hadn't felt in years. She told herself it was nothing more than gratitude, a moment of shared comfort during a storm. But the thought of him lingered, quietly filling the spaces Mark had left empty. Mark called 2 days later from overseas. His voice was tired, distracted, and full of business talk. "How's everything there?" he asked between emails and background noise. Emily smiled politely, answering as if everything was fine. She didn't mention Jason or the power outage. It didn't seem important. Or maybe she didn't want to explain how much that one evening had affected her. When the call ended, she stared at the phone in silence. Mark hadn't asked if she missed him. He hadn't said that he did. That realization hurt more than she expected. She took a deep breath, trying to brush it away, but a quiet ache sat in her chest. A few days later, Jason texted her again. "Got the new job offer officially. Moving to Chicago next month." Her heart sank for reasons she couldn't quite explain. "That's great, Jason. I'm proud of you." "Thanks," he replied. "But I'll miss this place. And talking to you." She stared at the message for a long time. Those words shouldn't have meant much, but they did, because she'd been missing genuine connection for so long. Later that week, Jason came over again to help fix a broken fence in the backyard. It was a bright, windy afternoon. Emily made lemonade, watching him work with his usual quiet focus. He looked older than his age, not physically, but emotionally. She could tell the divorce had changed him deeply. "You didn't have to do all this," she said as he tightened the last screw. He smiled. You've done enough for me over the years. Think of it as a thank you before I leave." She smiled back, but the word leave made her chest tighten. Chicago's a big city. You'll like it. Maybe, he said softly, but I'll miss the peace here, and the people who make it feel like home. Their eyes met again, and this time she looked away first. The air felt heavier, though neither of them said what they were thinking. It wasn't love, not even desire. It was something quieter, the sadness of two people who understood each other too late after he left that day. Emily walked through the house, her heart unsettled. Every memory of the past week replayed in her mind, his voice, his kindness, his laughter. She knew she shouldn't think about him so much, but she couldn't help it. That night, she sat on the porch watching the sunset. The sky burned orange and gold, fading into soft gray. For years, she had shared these evenings alone. Now, for the first time, she wished someone was sitting beside her, someone who actually saw her. The next weekend, Jason called again. "Hey, I'm cleaning out my mom's old house before I go. Could you help me sort through some of her things? You were close to her." Emily hesitated. That house held many memories. Jason's late mother had been her friend before she married Mark. But she agreed. "Of course. I'll come tomorrow." When she arrived, the house smelled faintly of old books and time. Dust particles floated in the sunlight. Jason was already there, sorting boxes in the living room. They worked quietly for hours, occasionally laughing over old photos and forgotten keepsakes. At one point, Jason pulled out a small jewelry box and handed it to her. Inside was a delicate gold locket. "She wanted you to have this," he said softly. Emily's eyes filled with emotion. "I can't take this, Jason. She told me once. It reminded her of you, calm, steady, always there for others. Please take it." She looked at him, touched by the sincerity in his voice. "Thank you," she whispered. For a long moment, neither spoke. The air between them felt different, full of gratitude and quiet pain. Emily wanted to say something, to tell him how proud she was of him, how much his kindness had meant to her these past few weeks. But the words stayed inside. When they finished packing, they sat on the porch steps, exhausted but peaceful. Jason looked out at the street. "You know," he said slowly, "I used to think family just meant blood. But I was wrong. It's about the people who stay, the ones who care even when they don't have to." Emily nodded, her throat tight. "You're right. Sometimes we only realize that when it's almost too late." He looked at her, smiling faintly. "I'm glad I got to know you beyond being just my dad's wife. You're more than that." Her heart skipped. "Jason." He shook his head gently. I know. I just wanted you to know you've made a difference." The honesty in his voice left her breathless. She wanted to hug him, to say something meaningful, but she couldn't trust her emotions. So she smiled instead, holding his gaze for just a second too long. That evening, when Emily returned home, she placed the locket on her bedside table. It glimmered softly in the light, a small, simple thing that now carried 1,000 unspoken words. Days passed quickly after that. Jason's move was only a week away. Emily found herself busying her days with chores, trying to ignore the growing sense of loss she felt. It didn't make sense. He wasn't her son, not truly. And yet his presence had filled her days with something she hadn't known she needed: companionship. The night before his move, Jason came over one last time. He wanted to drop off Mark's old photo albums and say goodbye. Emily invited him in, her heart heavy but calm. They sat together, flipping through old pictures, family gatherings, birthdays, vacations. Jason laughed at his teenage photos, and Emily joined in. Though her smile faded when she saw pictures of her and Mark from their early years. She looked happy then, truly happy. "Those were good times," she said quietly. Jason nodded. "Yeah, you both looked really in love." She sighed. "We were. But people change, life changes." He looked at her thoughtfully. "You still deserve to feel loved, Emily. Everyone does." The words hit deeper than he knew. Emily closed the album and looked at him. "Thank you, Jason, for saying that." He smiled gently. For what it's worth, you've reminded me what kindness looks like. Outside, the wind rustled the trees. The moment felt final, like the closing of a chapter neither wanted to end. Jason stood, picking up his bag. I should go. Early flight tomorrow. Akeem nodded, trying to keep her voice steady. Safe travels. Chicago's lucky to have you. He smiled, his eyes soft. Take care of yourself, Emily. When he left, the house felt heavier than ever. The silence that followed wasn't peaceful, it was full of everything she hadn't said that night. She sat by the window, holding the locket. She thought of all the conversations, the laughter, and the quiet comfort they had shared. It wasn't love, not in the romantic sense, but something more bittersweet, a bond built from loneliness, care, and timing. She realized something important then. It wasn't Jason she longed for, it was connection, presence, to be seen again after years of feeling invisible. Jason had reminded her that she still had warmth inside her heart, still had the ability to feel and care deeply. When she finally went to bed, tears quietly rolled down her cheeks, but they weren't from sadness. They were from gratitude for the storm that brought him to her door, for the kindness that had helped her rediscover herself. The next morning, she got a text from Jason. Landed safely. Thanks for everything, Emily. I'll visit soon. She smiled through her tears. Typing back, take care of yourself, Jason. You'll do great things. And for the first time in years, she felt light, not because her loneliness had vanished, but because she had learned that even the briefest human connection could bring back a piece of who she used to be. Weeks passed after Jason left for Chicago, and the silence in the house grew familiar again. At first, Emily filled her days with chores, reading, and gardening. She told herself life was returning to normal, but she knew something had shifted inside her. The quiet now felt heavier, sharper, like an echo that reminded her of everything she had avoided feeling for years. Jason's messages came, often in the first few weeks. Photos of the city skyline, stories from his new job, texts that started with "You won't believe what happened today" and ended with "Miss our talks." Emily always replied warmly, hiding this small ache his words left behind. She missed him, but not in a way that was inappropriate. She missed the warmth, the conversations that made her feel human again. One Sunday morning, while making coffee, she found herself thinking about Mark again. He'd been gone for almost 6 months on business trips that seemed endless. His calls were shorter now, his tone distant. Their conversations revolved around logistics, bills, property maintenance, errands. There was no laughter, no affection, only routine. Emily realized that she had stopped expecting anything more later that day. She walked into the backyard, the autumn air crisp and cool. The garden was quiet except for the rustling of dry leaves. She sat on the porch steps, staring at the spot where Jason had once fixed the fence. Memories of that day came flooding back. The sound of his laughter, the sunlight catching his hair, the way his kindness had made her feel seen. She smiled softly. That brief connection had done more for her heart than years of polite silence in her marriage. That evening, Mark finally came home. He looked tired, older somehow, his briefcase hanging heavily from his hand. Emily greeted him with a gentle smile. How was the trip? Busy, he said, dropping his things by the door. Everything's fine at the office. How have you been? She hesitated. I've been okay. The pipes are fixed, and the house feels better now. He nodded absently. Good, good. They ate dinner mostly in silence, broken only by the clinking of cutlery. Emily watched him carefully, noticing how distant he seemed, not angry. Just ... elsewhere. She realized how long it had been since they truly talked. After dinner, she found herself standing by the window, watching the night sky. Mark joined her quietly, holding a cup of tea. For a moment, they stood side by side, the years between them, heavy but unspoken. I know I've been gone too much, he said suddenly. She looked at him, surprised. He sighed, staring into his cup. I don't know how to slow down anymore. The company's everything right now. I keep thinking once things settle, we'll get back to normal. But he trailed off. Emily's voice was soft. Maybe we don't need to wait for things to settle. Maybe we just start now." He looked at her, really looked at her for the first time in a long while. "You're right," he said quietly. "I've missed you, Em. I didn't even realize how much." Tears stung her eyes. For so long, she'd felt invisible. To hear those words felt like a small piece of sunlight breaking through years of cloud. "I've missed you too," she whispered. That night, they talked for hours. Not about work, not about obligations, but about life. About their first years of marriage. About how time had changed them. About how they both felt lost in their own ways. It wasn't a perfect reconciliation, but it was honest. In the days that followed, something subtle began to shift. Mark started working from home twice a week. They took morning walks together. Sometimes they sat in the living room with coffee, talking about small things, the neighbors, the weather, plans for the holidays. The walls between them started to thin piece by piece, still. Emily couldn't stop thinking about Jason. His kindness had reminded her what human connection could feel like, what being understood truly meant. But she also knew what they shared wasn't meant to become something else. It was a lesson, not a temptation. One afternoon, she received a message from him. "Hey, I might come home for a weekend soon. Thought I'd check on my mom's house and maybe grab dinner with you and Mark, if that's okay." Emily smiled as she read it. "That would be wonderful. Mark's been asking about you too." When Jason visited a few weeks later, things felt different, calmer. He looked happy, confident, lighter. Over dinner, they all laughed together, sharing stories like a real family. Emily watched the two men talk, realizing how much time had changed them both. After dinner, while Mark went to take a call, Jason lingered in the kitchen, helping her clean up. He looked at her with a quiet smile. "You look happier," he said. She smiled back. "Maybe I am." "I'm glad," he said softly. "You deserve to be." She looked at him for a moment, her eyes warm. "Thank you, Jason. You helped me remember something important, that it's never too late to care again." He nodded, understanding more than words could express. "I should be thanking you. You reminded me that even when life falls apart, there's still kindness to find." When he left that evening, there were no lingering glances, no unspoken emotions, just mutual respect, gratitude, and peace. Emily watched him drive away, her heart full but calm, in the months that followed. Emily and Mark slowly rebuilt their marriage. They went on weekend trips, took long drives, and even laughed again. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. One night, as they sat together watching a movie, Mark reached for her hand and said, "I know I've made you feel alone before. I don't ever want to do that again." She squeezed his hand gently. "We both forgot how to hold on, but we're learning again." That night, Emily realized something deeper. Love wasn't always a grand passion or a perfect story. Sometimes it was quiet forgiveness, slow healing, and learning to see each other again after years of distance. As spring approached, Emily found herself back in the garden planting new flowers. The air was warm, full of promise. She wore the gold locket Jason had given her, now a reminder not of what could have been, but of what was a moment in time that helped her rediscover herself. One evening, while watering the plants, she noticed Mark standing at the doorway, watching her with a small smile. "You look happy out here," he said. She laughed. "I am. Feels good to start fresh." He walked over and kissed her forehead gently. "Then let's keep it that way." Emily smiled up at him, her heart finally at peace. The house that had once felt too quiet now hummed softly with warmth and laughter again. Later that night, as she sat by the window looking at the stars, she thought about the path that had led her here. The flood, the loneliness, Jason's kindness, every moment had carried a lesson. Life had broken her open, but it had also shown her that even pain could lead to understanding. Her phone buzzed. A message from Jason. "Got promoted today. Thanks again for believing in me." She smiled, typing back, "You did that yourself, Jason, but I'm proud of you." As she set the phone down, she felt a deep sense of closure. Everything had found its place. Jason had found his future, and she had found her peace. Emily looked at Mark asleep beside her and whispered softly, "We made it back." For the first time in a long while, she believed it.